Hi, my name is Zeke with Highland Park Lapidary, and today we're going to talk about polishes. So, I see a lot about people asking why their polish is not good. So, I have a few examples today, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that you can look for to know why you're not getting a great polish. Now, I just quickly did some where you can see this is a really poor polish. You can see the little white scratches down in there. Those little white spots are from the grinding wheel. Those long streaks right there are still saw marks. Now this applies to polishing little agate specimens or doing cabochons. It's the same principles for both. So you can see both those are, you got the white marks there, which are going to be from grinding. That's your grinding wheel leaving marks. Those long streaks are still saw marks. So the way you would fix this agate is actually by taking it all the way back to the very first step and grinding those out. And I recommend checking your stone after each wheel. So you're going to dry your stone off completely and look at it. Because you could have easily seen these saw marks. And after the second wheel, you would have seen those white scratches. So there's an example of you just didn't spend enough time on your first wheel to get all the saw marks out. This is another similar example where you can see the saw marks at the top there where the light is reflecting. And I like to use the light, by the way. I'm always looking at where the light reflection is because I moved that reflection around to look at the piece. Like you can see saw marks down there on the bottom here. You can see saw marks at the top here. If you look across the whole polish, there's not a ton of major scratches like you would saw in the last piece, but this is still an example of a bad polish from... This was probably, well, it should have been taken all the way back to the first wheel, but the second wheel on your cab machine, a 220 grit, could have fixed this. But I see a lot of people asking, why can't I get that mirror gloss? And it's actually the first two wheels is where you're going to spend that, or the second two wheels is where you're going to spend the most amount of time to get that great polish. Now, here is a different example. This is a good polish on this agate for the most part. It's got some scratches in the surface that could have been taken out. But if you look at this, those little micro fractures in there, that's from cutting this agate on a trim saw. That's where someone took this agate and pushed it through a trim saw and created all these long curved fractures in this. Now, the only way to fix this agate is to either take another slice off of this with a better saw or to grind down on your first wheel until you remove all of those little micro fractures. Probably got to take an eighth to a quarter of an inch off to get it this perfect again. So, but the polish is not too bad on this one. It's not a perfect polish, but it's the best one we've looked at so far. That is just an example of cutting, though, where someone had pushed this through a trim saw and didn't, and got all these little micro fractures in there. Now here's a cabochon that overall this is a pretty good polish on this cabochon. But if you look in the middle there, there's a little flat spot. If I move the light across it, you can see those little white scratches again. This spot was missed on the first wheel, or I'm sorry, on the second wheel, and just never got better through the cabbing process because it wasn't inspected thoroughly enough. So again, this cab, I would take all the way back to the second wheel on your cab machine if you're using a standard 6-wheel cab machine. And I would grind it down till those little white scratches are gone and then finish the cab. But overall, the polish is pretty good. It's just that one spot in the middle there that makes this a flawed cab. Here is an example of a good polish that is just not finished. So this is an example of something where you would look at this and say, well, it's not the wet look that I want, but I don't see any scratches or flaws in this. There's some fractures in this agate, but not from cutting. So this one just needs to be taken to leather with cerium to get that wet, glossy look. Otherwise, it's a good polish. So once this has been buffed with leather and cerium oxide, this will have that wet look that is so desired. And of course, I have an example here of a perfect polish. This is a Moctezuma that John had polished, I believe. And it is just wet, mirrored look. So this is a good polish. No scratches or little flat spots or grind marks. Absolutely stunning piece. Now, when I talk about the cab machine, I'm going to walk over here to our 6-inch cab machine because this is pretty standard setup here. Excuse my messy machine. I'll wipe that down a little bit while we're looking here. A lot of the problems that you just saw are going to be fixed with these two wheels right here. This is a 220 grit diamond wheel, and this is a 280 grit. Now, I prefer to use an expandable drum or the wet belt sander with a 220 grit belt on it to get the scratches and flat spots out, but this will work fine as well. This wheel, you'll still have some minor flat spots, but for the most part, your stone will be pretty rounded and look pretty good. You won't see any of those major white scratches in it if you've done your job correctly on this wheel. After you've done this wheel, your stone should look smooth looking, and you'll see some grind marks, but for the most part, it'll just be the 280 scratches in there. It'll be very smooth looking. By the time you get to 600 grit over here, your stone should be looking polished. You should start to see a little bit of a gloss on there. You should see any major scratches or flat spots. It should look pretty good. And then from there, you're just going to go higher and higher, the 1200 and 3000 grit to get that nice polish. And then on this one is not set up with it because I took it off. Normally this machine comes with a felt pad on the end. But we would use a leather wheel like this bull wheel here on our wet belt sander to get that mirror finish that you see. If you're polishing an agate specimen like what you just saw, you can actually go up to 600 grit on silicon carbide and get a good polish with just this leather wheel. So a lot of people, go, oh, I tried cerium, I tried Zam, I tried various different polishes, and I'm not getting the great polish that I'm looking for. And it's almost never the polish. It's almost always the amount of time that they spent working on the second and third wheel that didn't get them that great result. It's the 220 to 280 grit that's really going to change how good your stone looks. So I would focus less on the final polish and more on your 80 and 220 grit wheels, because that'll make a world of difference. You can get a good polish with just 3000 grit. You get a great polish with 3000 grit and cerium oxide. So I hope that helped, and I'll shoot another video to follow this one up showing how your cab should look after each step. So follow us for more. Thanks for watching.